Hey guys, welcome back to Sockets and Sideburns. So we're back in the garage. The Clio is currently in behind me waiting for some more work, so you should be seeing that soon. However, today we're at the bench and it's another in the autopsy series where we take apart failed parts and see if we can figure out what went wrong. So today we have, let's see if you remember this, the parking brake motor from the Scenic. So this is the rear parking brake motor from a Renault Scenic 3, a 2012 1.5 DCI. But basically all the Scenic 3s and Grand Scenic 3s and a few other Renault models like Megane's, if it's fitted with electronic parking brake, then it's going to be using this motor and the same or a very similar setup. Now this one here is the original motor, which is a TRW. This one failed in April or May in 2023, so it made 11 years of service, which is not terrible. The other original one on this car from the other side was changed when that caliper seized, so the motor actually outlasted the caliper itself. Now this one failed in the typical manner for these, which was just literally no warning, and then it seizes on, which is the typical position for them to fail in. They'll seize applied, then it fails to operate after that, meaning that the handbrake can't be released, leaving you stranded, the car immobile. I made a video all about it and how to manually release the handbrake and how to replace the motor. You may even be here having had watched that. If not, link in the description and a card up on the screen now. Now usually when these fail, it's going to happen on colder and wetter days, so obviously this issue is far more common in the winter. We will get into why that is as we go on with the video. Now, the video I made on changing these supports that theory as well, as when it's cold, the video's pretty much double per day compared to when it's warm, like it's warming up now. So what are the failure modes on these motors? What typically goes wrong? Obviously, before you even would have removed it, you're going to have checked your connections in here, make sure they've not got any corrosion on, because you can just clean them up on the car. We're talking about what actually goes wrong with the motor itself. Now, by far the most common failure, I say common, but it's essentially every single one, is water ingress. Now, what typically happens is, if you can see this crack here, that looks like it's originating from the ear, but it actually starts where this goes over the caliper. This is what goes over the caliper here, and they've got that crack just there, and that's where our water is making its way in. Now, when this one originally came off, it was literally just dripping water out. I've got the caliper here, so you have it together like that. And when I broke the connection there so that I could manually release the handbrake, it just poured water out of that void in there. In fact, if we give it a little shake, there might still be some water in there. Well, it's been a while, but there you go. You might not make that on the camera. I haven't got any liquid on my hands. That's making its way out from betwixt that seam there. If we give it a nice shake, it's just working its way out. So it has still got water inside it, even now. So the way this crack happens is corrosion starts behind this seal here, in the seat behind this seal. And as it expands, it just forces open, because the motor is sat over the caliper like that, and as that seal is forced out, as the corrosion starts underneath it, it forces this open and it just splits the housing open there. Now, when I removed this one and went to put a new one on, you get a new seal with the new motors, and initially I just brushed out the corrosion in the seal seat, and then I went on to fit a new seal into it. If I just take off this seal now, here, you can see in that seat there is where all that corrosion starts. So I brushed out the corrosion in that seal seat, fitted the new seal on, went to put the new motor on over the top of that, but it would not go on. So I took the seal back off again, and I could actually see all down in this seat here, there was actually so much corrosion that I ended up literally scraping chunks of it out with a pocket screwdriver. Now the caliper is aluminium, so the corrosion is the white powdery stuff, aluminium oxide, and it just scrapes out easily and doesn't leave any pitting or anything on the actual seal seat. So you can restore it up to quite good nick. Now another way that this could crack, of course, is that you could, when the water in here, if this void is filled with water and the temperature drops below freezing, like I was saying earlier, when water freezes, of course, it's going to expand, and this could maybe be another thing that could cause that initial crack on the casing, or perhaps if the water's already in the internals and it freezes in there, it could seize them by just turning into a solid, obviously. Now, how does the water get in there to begin with, to begin this corrosion in the first place? Well, I don't know. Perhaps it just seeps in over the years, slowly, eventually resulting in that crack as it builds up. As I said, it does typically take years and years for this fault to materialize. Sometimes this fault doesn't even appear before the caliper itself seizes. So I'm guessing it's just a slow build-up of that oxidization under the seal until it eventually cracks that housing, and then you just get cascade failure, basically. Now, another thing to note is that this problem where this housing will crack like this on these EPB motors, it's not really Renault specific. It happens a lot to these EPB motor units. So what I'm expecting is when we do open this casing up, what we're going to find is that it's all corroded in here, and the internals, whether it's the gear set, the motor, anything like that, is going to be seized purely due to corrosion. Now, another failure that you can get, but this is far rarer, is that you can find that in here, instead of being filled with water, you might find that this is actually filled with brake fluid. And basically how that happens is it can leak from the caliper out the back where the motor drive goes into here. There's just an O-ring inside the caliper behind that, and if it leaks from there, then it'll get out into the motor. Now, this should be spotted a lot earlier than a water leak though, since the Scenics have a brake fluid low-level warning light, and it wouldn't take much to drop that to trip it on, bringing your attention to it. Now, other than that, I guess you could get things like the motor itself wearing out, although I highly doubt that would ever happen. You could get gears stripping teeth, or the belt inside that links the motor to the gear set could snap or jump some teeth, rip some teeth off, something like that. I've not seen or heard of that ever happening, but hey, given enough time, anything that can go wrong will eventually go wrong. Right, we'll split this open and get a look. Now, just to warn you, this isn't going to be a repair video. I will see if I can get this working again, but I really don't recommend repairing these. A new one of these is about 30 to 40 pounds. For the effort involved, I doubt many people will want to repair this. That being said, if it is simply seized from corrosion, we will be able to get it going again just for the price of a little penetrating oil, most likely. However, it likely wouldn't be long until it's seized up again, unless you can stop the water ingress by sorting out that crack. Now, I've seen some people use a soldering iron to melt it up back together, or maybe you could use a plastic repair product like a JB Weld product or something like that. But in all likelihood, it will seize again much, much sooner than a new one, no matter how good a job you do of unseizing it, making it pretty again, and sealing up wherever the water was getting in the first place. And then you're going to be stuck somewhere with your handbrake stuck on again. It's just generally not worth it for the sake of 30 to 40 pounds for a new one. Before we start, we will just hook it up to 12 volts again, make sure it's still dead. Because when this came out before, when I took it off, it did turn over with 12 volts applied and then immediately seize straight back up. So let's see. And as predicted, absolutely no life. And that's direct to a 12 volt battery, car battery. So no life left in this whatsoever in its current state. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is actually get in here. I am going to try and do it without damaging it too much in case anyone watching is following along trying to repair it. We do have a nice wide seam down here. So I'm going to get a chisel in here and hopefully we can just very carefully and evenly tap this off. I'm hoping this cover's just a press fit onto the body. If it doesn't come easily, we might have to transfer over to the vise. I do think in order to get in there, we are going to have to hold that in the vise. So we'll move over there now so we can get better purchase on it and give it a good wallop. Right, we're over at the vise now. If you want to save your one, although I don't recommend it, as I have mentioned, you will probably want to perhaps mount it to the caliper or mount it in some soft jaws so that you don't damage. I'm going on where the motor comes through it there, but you may not want to do that if you're trying to save it. Yeah, the disadvantage of course is that being plastic, it is gonna slip if we strike in the direction that it can slip in the vise. So what I'm doing here, rather than trying to strike over and away, I'm coming down into that seam in an attempt to split that seam in the first place, and it does actually seem to be working. So if we flip it over the other way, do the same thing again, just literally straight down into the seam itself where it's still quite narrow. It's come away at the bottom nicely, but it isn't coming away at the top yet. So I'll just, apologies that you can't see, but there we go, that was a nice pop. I wonder if now it would just pry. There we go. I think that's got it. It's quite a tight fit. Okay, so we've cracked the one side off over at the vise. It's still wanting to hold up on just this part here. There we go. It's got it. All right, that covers off, and I would say we haven't split it or marred that seal, when it is indeed just a press fit all the way around on here. And on first inspection, does not appear that it is actually seized. You can see the gear set. I was expecting to find possibly the gear set or the motor itself would be seized, but what I'm assuming, I can see, we'll have to get it out, but I can see that there is some corrosion down around that motor. So quite possibly, more likely, this would not be repairable, because you're not going to get one of those motors for less than you can get the, well, you may do, but for less than you can pick up the EPB motor itself for. But that is surprising. I was expecting that there would be some kind of actual mechanical seizure there, that wouldn't be able to just freely rotate. The gear set seems to be mostly plastic there. Obviously there's going to be bearings and whatnot, but I was expecting the motor. I can see corrosion on the terminals as well, feeding it. We've got some quite beefy terminals feeding it there. So if we pop off this plastic piece here, I believe this is just a belt guard, and I think it might provide tension for the belt as well. Again, you might need to do this a bit more gently if you are looking to, oh no, it seems to come off quite easily. If you are looking to salvage everything, you might want to do that a bit more gently, but that does just come off by hand actually. And then we can slip the belt off as well. Get that out of the way. And then as we rotate that gear set, we'll just confirm there's no brake there. That still runs as well, providing drive to the actual drive for the caliper. No, I don't think that that is just going to freely come out of there. I think that's probably going to want desoldering. So I'll take this away and have a quick look. So the connections appear actually to be crimped on. I could possibly pick them apart, but really don't have the time to be spending on doing that. So I'm probably just going to cut the connections here, because I'll still be able to supply power to it then and see if we can get it to run. What I most want to do is see the condition of the motor, because that is what I believe. Well, obviously, that's where the failure must lie. If we can get the motor to spin, we know we could possibly save it. But if you can see here, that corrosion, obviously that motor's been filled with water, so that's definitely the problem. Now, I'll supply power, obviously, on these two beefy wires here, and I'll simply cut there and there. You could possibly try and spray down into it and get it to work in situ. However, I actually want to get it out, see the length of the corrosion, and then try and get it to work then. If we can get the motor spinning, I mean, I'll refit it and then we'll put the belt back on. I should also say the way these work, I mean, it's pretty obvious, but you can take your 12 volts to the two terminals here, comes in through there. Obviously the belt's usually on here, and that just simply sends drive from the motor to the gear set, and that just rotates the drive, applies or releases the EPB. So I will just, will leave us a nice chunky amount, cut these wires, and now we can pull this motor, and oh yeah, lovely. I think we can safely say that there's our problem right there. That, and you can see that's just stripped from in that, the recess for it there. It's all wet in there. That is obviously, they are this way mounted in the car, so this would be down. So obviously as the water seeps in, that's where it's going to sit in that big cavity for the motor there and just corrode this. So what I'm going to try and do, I'll give this a clean up and I'll give it a good spray down, and we'll just see if we supply 12 volts to either end, if we can get it to spin up again, but it just may simply be way too far gone on the inside. I'll give it a little lube up now and we'll see if we can get it to run. Put a little shop towel down, and I do believe this drive might come off. I'm not going to force it, but well, that was nice and crusty too. And that is turning freely. I might just start with first just some contact cleaner, because obviously everything is turning freely, so It's not that it's actually seized in there. It might be that in order to clean it up sufficiently, we'll actually have to potentially think about prying this cover off if it's simple enough to do. Let's get some air in there, dry that out, and let's see if that's made any. I mean, what's coming out is not clean. Take the cap off first, pull the pin. It's a Johnson motor, I believe. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm sure I've heard that it's used in drills and whatnot, but that's only on like tear down things that I might have watched before. I'm sure I've heard that name banded about, but motors aren't exactly my forte or interests. Right, let's stick some power across that and see if that makes any difference at all. I did hear what I thought was an attempt then. No, nothing. I wonder if doesn't seem to be any easy way to be popping this cover off here. Usually you might find that there's a tang pressed over or something like that, but in this case there does not appear to be anything suggestive of how you might pop that cover plate off, at least without deforming it completely. I can't see any tangs or anything like that pressed over. These are just locators, I believe. I can't see any way of getting into there to refurbish this or provide it with any more. Perhaps if we come through these two holes here from the top down and try and flush it out. It is the level of corrosion in here, generally speaking, is going to be needing to be removed by abrasive methods. You're not just going to get that to whip off with contact cleaner. I would be very, very surprised. How about if we literally are fully on those connectors there? Cannot say fairer than that for it. Let's give it another go. Oh, yay! I assume you might not see the drive spinning, but what you will see is the vibration of the motor. And see, look at that, it's instantly give the ghost up again. So it was able to get it going for a second and then she's straight back to dead. That is what it did when it was pulled off the car. It ran for a second and then back to dead again. Yeah, Yeah, same thing. So now we've pretty much proved that. I think what I might do is I might just, it's not going to be pretty, but perhaps if I give her a spin by hand. No, I don't think it has any interest in running again. This is the exact thing that happened when we pulled it off the Scenic. I just thought I'd give it a quick go off with no load on it or anything. And it ran for a split second, then immediately seized back up again. But at least that verifies to us that the motor is the fault. Doesn't matter which polarity we go for. She's not running. So now we know we can get her to run. I'm thinking this will pop out, but perhaps not. They have really done their best to make it unserviceable, I'm afraid. Just bear with me a second, I'm going to stick it in the vise. Have to be off camera and I'll see if I can get it to pop this cover off. Okay, we do indeed have victory. I can't think how you could do that nicely and save the motor afterwards. A lot of patience would be my guess, which I simply am not so inclined to be doing. I just want to see the level of corrosion that we're dealing with in here, if we can get down into it. Thought I'd got somewhere then, but that's just presumably a spacer of some description in order to perhaps make it fit into that cavity in there. Right, I had to dash off there quick, but I'm back. It's the next day now. What I basically did before I went was I soaked this whole motor in plus gas, and just to see, I've left it overnight obviously, and it'll just see whether that will help free it up now. I wonder if it'll get down past between the plastic and there. Got it all down in that tiny gap there, all the way around, and literally just soaked it with it. See if it'll pry out now using a bit of a beefier screwdriver. There we are. It's come out nicely. Right, let's pull this out. There you are, look. Just look at the state of the armature, covered in corrosion. I mean, it's even bringing them together, it's that bad there. The windings have got it on as well. There's just no way. I'll go and get a bit of Scotch pad, which would be something that wouldn't be too abrasive on this, but that's what it should look like there. There's still a good bit there that doesn't quite look so bad. That's what we should be seeing, and you see the state of the corrosion on that there, and then down inside in the magnets as well. You see in the case and on the magnets the state of that. There's just no recovering something like this. Right, I've got a little Scotch pad, let's see. See, that's brought it up shiny. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't think just contact cleaner would do any good. You need to be a bit more aggressive, use something abrasive in here. I mean, it is coming off okay, but that's just the light stuff, the stuff that's really set on here. I'm not sure that you can see, we've got those back to shiny, those two that I've rubbed on there, but there's still some serious deposits on there. Let's see if they will shift. Looks like they are shifting actually, but how you would clean up down on your coils your windings. I've no idea how you would get them to be clean enough again to be satisfactory. Like I said, I just really can't see the point why you would try and save this. But, you know, if you wanted to save yourself 40 quid, you might give it a go. This might be sufficient. And if you manage to spray them down, the windings in there enough, soak them in something, you might get enough of it off, I suppose. But I definitely would not recommend it. I'd just say buy a new one. So if you really wanted to try and repair this, the way I'd recommend getting this motor apart, if that was your fault, this is the only thing in here that I would say is the most difficult to repair, and also obviously it's the most likely thing to have gone. But if you really wanted to try and repair it, I would say the best thing to do before you even remove this top cover plate from it, absolutely soak it in something, some penetrating oil like Plus Gas, WD-40, whatever you've got. Just soak it, just so that it comes apart all that bit easier, rather than risk potentially damaging it by prying it open like I've done. Saying that, this motor clearly is not made to be serviceable, so if you want to give it a go, all I can honestly say is good luck. Alright, the last thing I wanted to do was to get a closer look at this crack, where it's cracked in there. Get a closer look at that, see how far it goes through. So that gear set, we'll get a look at the gear set as well actually after we've done this. That gear set just pushes out, and then the crack in here, it does go almost all the way to the back. It doesn't look like it does. It looks like it stops just past here, but actually, if I go, you can just see it, but also the screwdriver catches there, and it's obviously wide there and just a hairline crack there. And the other thing is that it is right the way through on the other side. You can see how far it's going, right to that seam there where you would put that cover back on. That's as far as it's gone, all the way through. So it does penetrate right through, but I think it was going to have left the gear set alone, because of course it comes in here and then it's presumably the water's dripping down just into that cavity where the motor is, would be the most common thing. So the gear set, since it doesn't feel rough at all, and obviously it's not seized, I'm going to guess that's spared the worst of the damage just simply by gravity. That just, so what the belt's driving, that just slides off, and then this is actually held together just by 1, 2, 3 clips. So let's try and pry this open quick. I'm not expecting, if the water got in here, I'm assuming you can see there's going to be grease in there, and that should all be washed out if the water had managed to get in there proper. But let's see. Everything looks great in there. We've still got grease. Everything's turning freely. I would be surprised if this could ever be your problem, because it is quite well sealed up in there like that, and everything well greased, all turning freely, no problem at all with that. You can see if I put that back on there, everything in there moving nicely. So I'd be surprised if that could ever be a problem, but if it was, unlike the motor, this is much more serviceable. You could easily take all of these gears out, clean them up a bit, relubricate this and get this going again, I would say, no problem. The real problem is the motor being so unserviceable. Now, all that being said, if you did manage to either get this motor going again, if you clean up everything, any corrosion in here, or unseize it if it's seized, and you manage to get it going again, or of course, after having had repaired whatever other fault you might have had, What you will of course need to do, as I said before, you need to fix that crack to stop any more water getting into here. And then after you've fixed that crack, you put the cover back on. What I would probably recommend doing is just putting a thin bead of silicone down in this here, so that when you push this cover back together, because it is just a press fit, and again, we don't know how the water initially gets in here. Like I said, my guess would be that it just seeps in slowly over the years until you get enough to form that crack, and then it's a cascade after that. But I would just recommend putting some sealer down in there, just so as you push these two halves back together, it squidges, and give yourself the best chance possible of keeping the water out of here in the future. And obviously you will need to repair that crack either by potentially melting it back together or something. That's what I've seen some people do, or some kind of plastic repair product like JB Weld or something like that might work also, but 40 quid. So I think that'll do us there. This autopsy is finished and pretty conclusive, I think. What we found here is pretty true to form. As we saw, the water just gets in here and pulls in the cavity for the motor. It all just sits in there, corroding the internals in the motor. Now you may get intermittent fault, or it might just die on you and never come back. Now I'm gonna guess this is how most of these fail. I have seen a few where the water ingress caused the motor to seize rather than electrically fail inside. Now just bear in mind, these do last a good long time. As I said, 8 to 12 years isn't bad if we're honest for something that's sitting so low on the car and is constantly exposed to the elements. As I said, sometimes these motors outlast the calipers they're actually attached to. Okay guys, as usual, if you've enjoyed this video or it's helped you out at all, then please hit that like button for me. If you'd like to see more videos from the channel in the future, then don't forget to subscribe, and you can find me over on Instagram @Sockets and Sideburns. Thanks for watching guys, I'll see you in the next video.